Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello once again and welcome to this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. There's a blizzard warning out until 9 p.m. this evening for the eastern Arctic coast there for zero visibilities at times, with winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour there, creating the blowing snow up in that area again until 9 p.m. And then the high wind warning down for the Juneau-Douglas area out through 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon for those winds to continue to gust above 60 miles per hour. On today's satellite, see a system here dropping southeastward from the Arctic that catching the eastern Arctic coast there with the wind and snow, and mostly high clouds slipping on down into the northeast interior here. Bulk of the moisture, though, dropping in across the Mackenzie River Delta, northwest Canada. Otherwise, clear skies here, southern Alaska, northward to the Brooks Range, and a lot of clear skies here with those gusty winds, dry winds across the southeast coast. But you can see down to the south here some areas of snow occurring, mostly Heidelberg to Annette and the extreme southern areas there. That's starting to slide off to the east there and should be ending sometime this evening if it hasn't already. Otherwise, a lot of clear skies here, Gulf of Alaska, across Kodiak Island. A few clouds, lower clouds along the southwest coast. Otherwise, mostly high stuff here spreading in from the Seward Peninsula into the interior. And then on the chart for today, this pretty active front bringing gale force winds out of the southeast there, gusts of 50 miles an hour in across Adak today, with rain associated with that, but extending back to the west-northwest. Just mostly cloudy skies with light winds there for the Pribilof Islands. Same thing for the eastern Aleutians, a little more clearing here, the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. High pressure still in control of the weather over the interior, but not quite as strong as it was yesterday. Center starting out 1,053 millibars. Today that main center sliding into northwest Canada. The gradient there keeping those the high wind warning out at least through 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon for the Juneau area, with gale force winds still in the forecast through tomorrow for all of the marine areas here, with the exception of Clarence Strait. Otherwise, winds diminished today along the North Gulf Coast from what we saw yesterday. Still a little gusty Valdez and Seward in the Copper River Delta area, but really dropped off at Yakutat yesterday, getting gusts over 40 miles an hour. Those went under 10 miles an hour during the afternoon today. But gradient here with this high over the Yukon. Eagle, for example, getting winds out of the east, gusting to 35 miles an hour, the temperature at 9 below zero. So that drops the wind chill down, probably to 35 below, something like that. Otherwise, the blowing snow on the eastern Arctic coast and really back to the west, just areas of flurries or nothing at all. And then it picks up a little bit here in the west with Cape Lisburne still getting gusts this afternoon out of the southwest there, up to 63 miles per hour. By contrast, Point Hope just seeing 30 mile per hour gusts, and then southerlies right through the Bering Strait, 35 miles an hour at Tin City, with skies going mostly clear here across St. Lawrence Island. Definitely the precipitation had ended there. Afternoon temperatures a little above freezing, 34 degrees at Savunga, and even lighter winds, drier conditions on down the coastline and the interior. Pretty typical here for January. Temperatures running 10 to 20, 25 below zero in areas right down into the Copper River Basin, and otherwise warmer, of course, out toward Cook Inlet and out to the west. For tonight, not a lot of change here over the interior. Still watch those winds will slowly diminish where they're still gusty here. Again, Resurrection Bay, Prince William Sound, and no change there for the Panhandle. Strong high holding up there to the north. Most of this system sliding southeastward, but keeps the eastern Arctic coast there and a threat of some light snow, but those winds will be coming down. And again, the blizzard warning will be ending at least by 9 p.m. or if it doesn't, they'll kick it out a little longer. But anyway, windy, clear, cold, all of the southeast coast now. Moisture kind of pulling back to the southwest, so it should be a mostly dry night, especially after midnight, and but more moisture down here to the south. And the front out west, tracking eastward a little bit, mostly just weakening in place almost here, right across the central Aleutians. Periods of rain, fog, AKwx. Winds slowly diminishing, but still looks like gales from roughly AKwx eastward to not quite making it to Nikolsky. And a little bit of an increase in the breeze here for the Pribilofs. Not so much for the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Still light winds, Bristol Bay, but offshore flow keeping the clouds out to the west there. So good VFR conditions, possibly all the way up toward Norton Sound. And then just some lingering mixed precipitation here. Pretty light there, western Seward Peninsula, and from the northwest coast here, possibly as far south as Kotzebue, but whatever falls will be quite light, and that'll extend up to Cape Lisburne, drier on the western Arctic coast. But the forecast for tomorrow is this moisture down here to the south begins to edge its way back northward there. But probably won't make it across Dixon Entrance. In fact, clouds might even have trouble doing that other than some high stuff. Otherwise, the strong winds continue. Northeast, anywhere, again, gusts above 60 miles an hour over the northern Panhandle, Juneau, and those areas. And a little bit lighter down to the south. Gales continue off the coast there. And again, a general decrease in the winds here, becoming lighter, definitely for Prince William Sound. All of south central Alaska, this pattern here may pick up those east winds in Delta, but probably dropping off from what you saw today over at Eagle. Otherwise, no changes, no big changes at all over the interior. Offshore flow here, again, keeping the clouds, mostly clear skies out to the west. By the time you get to the Pribilofs, you'll pick up a few clouds there. Variably cloudy conditions, but dry down across the eastern Aleutians. And then a little more clearing afternoon sun for the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island looking really good tomorrow. Up to the north, Brooks Range pretty fair with the north slope picking up some clouds. And then you've got some flurry conditions going there from Barrow down the west side here, again to Point Hope with that continued southwest flow. Mild temperatures to go with that. And still a risk of a little bit of light snow and fog there for the eastern Aleutians. But this front quite weak by tomorrow afternoon in this area, as the main system pulling off to the east. But back to the north there, another storm in the Arctic will be dropping southeastward. And we'll see for tomorrow, or for Monday, that next system pushes a stronger front southward there. So snow, blowing snow on the increase once again. Gales back in the marine forecast on the east side there. So probably going into some blowing snow, possibly another blizzard warning coming up. But conditions much more benign back to the west there. Just some flurries possibly as far west as Barrow with pretty light winds now on the west side. Nothing but high pressure controlling just about all of Alaska, at least the mainland areas here, south of the North Slope or from the North Slope southward into the Gulf of Alaska. Good VFR conditions. Light winds, actually a lot of light variable winds in the forecast for the marine areas in Prince William Sound. Down across Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, light winds, and still carrying storms, or I believe gale warnings for the Lynn Canal area through Monday, but should see a general diminishing of the winds there, but they definitely not going to end altogether, still carrying gales, many of the marine areas. And now this front, another front pushing northward will spread moisture, which will be in the form of snow across the Queen Charlotte Islands, Dixon Entrance, and possibly to some extent into the southern southeast coast there. Again, Annette, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, Klawock, Heidelberg have the best chance of seeing that if it gets that far north. dry to the north there with mostly clear skies again. Sitka on up to Haines and Skagway. Clear skies North Gulf Coast here, Yakutat to Cordova, Valdez. Light winds, clear skies down across the Barren Islands and Kodiak Island, kind of variably cloudy there. Maybe some clouds slipping in on the east side, maybe not. And high pressure there over the western interior. That keeps light offshore flow going, so maybe a few clouds off the coast, but it looks good for VFR from the Alaska Peninsula right on up into the Seward Peninsula, maybe even St. Lawrence Island. And dry for the western Arctic coast. Out to the west, a few rain and snow showers possibly developing in a little bit milder southeast flow. Ahead of this front out to the west, which really doesn't move at all, although another system coming northward that kind of pushes it back to the west a little bit there, which keeps it kind of damp over the central Aleutians, but winds look pretty light there for Monday. And really not much of an increase here at all in the wind over the eastern Bering Sea. Pretty light for the Pribilofs, picking the winds up a little bit west of St. Matthew Island. Otherwise a real slack gradient here all across the west and even back to the west there. Not much going on. Just a fairly weak low there just off the Kamchatka Peninsula. So looking at moving on to temperatures this afternoon there for the Panhandle, mid-30s. Southern areas 30 degrees at Ketchikan, 34. AKwx and a 32-degree reading for Sitka. Otherwise lowered upper 20s there over the eastern areas with Juneau at 27, Skagway just 13, Yakutat pushed up to 31, 26 Cordova, minus 17 this afternoon in McCarthy, 7 above there at Gunsight, and then Tok, minus 29. They're already colder than 30 below. I think they're about 33 below currently. Otherwise, Fairbanks minus 21, Tanana 23 below, Willow minus 6, but Talkeetna at 19, 12 in Palmer, 6 at Kenai, up to 28 for Homer and Kodiak at 34, minus 17 for Fort Yukon and minus 16 at Bettles, minus 9 Anaktuvik, but have a pretty good warm-up on the north slope in the Arctic coast with Barrow up there. Place formerly known as Barrow up to 28, 27 at Wainwright, and also at Cape Lisburne. Back down to 7 there at Kotzebue, 18 at Nome with 25, Deering and Shishmaref, as well as Tin City, 34 Savunga, minus 17 over at McGrath, and then going above 0 down the river there to 8 above at Bethel, 24 at Monik. And upper 30s there for the Pribilof Islands. Some afternoon sun showing up there, especially at St. George. 46 on Alaska, 43 at Adak. And for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 30s here from Sand Point, or from Chignik there, all the way over to Cold Bay. And then notably colder as you head northeast. We're 12 at King Salmon, Dillingham at 20. Forecast lows for tonight, again, much like last night here, well below 0 over the central eastern interior, 0 to 10 below down into the Cook Inlet area, south central Alaska, milder along the coast. Highs tomorrow, North Slope Arctic coast, back into the 20s again, staying below 0 over much of the interior, especially central and eastern areas. Teens to lower 20s south of the mountains, and 20s for the southeast coast, but in the teens up to the north. 30s Alaska Peninsula, near 40 for the Aleutians. Flying weather, good VFR tomorrow across a big portion of the Bering Sea and the mainland areas. Marginal VFR Arctic coast, IFR possible here through the Bering Strait. Otherwise for tomorrow afternoon, not a lot of change. VFR in the interior, Gulf of Alaska, southeast coast. Areas of marginal VFR now, central Aleutians, maybe up to Cold Bay, and then possibly a swath right through here. Possibly, and then IFR from the Bering Strait northward and mostly off the Arctic coast. For Anaktuvik and Adigan, passes open tomorrow. Same forecast for the Alaska Range. Rainy, windy, Lake Clark, Merrill, and rainy, windy, Isabel, Mentasta, all VFR tomorrow. Tanita, another VFR day. Portage VFR for the next several days, and actually Chilkoot and White VFR again. And for the freezing levels, with the upper level high now back to the west here, that's where the highest freezing levels are over the eastern Bering Sea at about 6,000 feet, 4,000 feet eastward here across the Kenai Peninsula. Icing above about 4,000 feet here for the Aleutians, and that's about it. Jet stream, big high pressure holding for the next 4 or 5 days actually. So south to north flow well to the west, northerly flow along or just east of the border. And for the 9,000 foot winds, northeast 40s here, still across the southeast coast, mainly the northern areas, 15 to 25 out to the west, stronger winds over the Bering Sea. Same pattern at 3,000 feet, a big high over the interior. Westerlies along the Arctic coast, southeast 30 to 50 knots from the eastern Aleutians into the central Bering Sea. Turbulence, moderate chop, eastern Aleutians to Atka, and severe anywhere here across all of the southeast coast. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again talking about the augmented reality sandbox is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version.
Sweet.
Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney.
And this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world?
Right.
This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, I mean, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at Dehne, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and it's a dynamic learning tool. And it responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching tool for topography can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping as an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade, yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney, thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu. EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
Welcome back. No big changes here for all of the southeast coast. Still gales out along the coastline from the northeast. 50-knot winds still on the forecast there for Northern Lynn Canal. 40 knots Stevens Passage, down to 30 for Clarence Strait. A little bit lighter here through the interior areas on Monday. 40 knots now for Lynn Canal to 25 for Clarence Strait. Still gales over most of the coastline here, but north 30 there in the extreme north coast. South central Alaska, Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, not light winds, 15 knots, picking up to 20 south of the Forelands to Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories there for the Barrens, otherwise the North Gulf Coast, light north winds. And then on Monday, even lighter winds, variable, light and variable here, Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island, right up Cook Inlet, northeast 15, Prince William Sound, and northwest become westerly at 15 for the North Gulf Coast. Bristol Bay tomorrow, northeast 15, southeast 20 here for the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise pretty light winds there up toward Kodiak. And then for Monday, really light winds here again, east-northeast to variable at just 10 knots for all these areas with 7 to 8 foot seas there on the Pacific side. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, southeast 20 knots, gales, minimum gales now right through here with that weakening front stuck over the central Aleutians. Lighter winds back to the west, and south 25 for the western Aleutians on Monday. East 20 to 25 knots central Aleutians, and southeast 20 for the Fox Islands. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, light easterlies, and then 20 knots from the southeast from the north side to small craft advisories there For St. Lawrence Island, gale warning still going here. St. Matthew Island westward, small craft advisories for the Pribilofs. Then those drop down to about 15 knots on Monday, 20 knots St. Matthew Island. Light winds from an east-northeast direction for the southwest coast. Up along the Arctic coast, lighter winds tomorrow here on the east side, actually coming down tonight to tomorrow just west 15 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast there. Southwest 20, central coast, and brisk wind advisories here for the western Arctic coast all the way down to Cape Thompson, then drop it back to 20 knots from there down to the Bering Strait. And then for Monday, really light winds, southeast 10 here from Wales up to Cape Thompson. South 15 turns southwest 15, and then begin to pick up here for the coast, central coast, west 20, and then back into the gales there for the eastern coast to demarcation point. And for tonight again, blizzard warning out until 9 p.m. for the eastern Arctic coast there, with the gusts of 50 miles an hour. High wind warning out for Juneau until 3 p.m. tomorrow, there with gusts above 60 miles an hour, although the entire southeast coast will be quite windy. Otherwise, no change over the interior. That holds through tomorrow as well. Still a pretty strong high over the Yukon Flats there, and even a stronger one over the Yukon. And that keeps the gradient pretty tight there across much of the Panhandle, especially north of Frederick Sound on up through Lynn Canal. Pretty light winds here for the coast with fair conditions, dry conditions. There we go. A few flurries on the central and western coast. This front weakening, but holds together enough to keep the gales going through tomorrow. And then that really washes out now, kind of a weak warm front heading westward again. A little bit of moisture, the Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians. Dry, light winds over all of the interior. Blizzard warning may come back into the eastern Arctic coast, as well as snow might slip on up into the southern Panhandle. Otherwise, as I mentioned, lighter winds, but still breezy there for the Panhandle.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.